Accounting made me miserable. I laugh at the silly mistakes I made, but I see many founders making the same kinds of mistakes. Hi, Ferris here. In this accounting mini-series, so far we've covered where to begin in accounting, tips on hiring a bookkeeper and an accountant, and the high risks involved in doing accounting on your own. Let's now talk about why and when you should hire a chief financial officer and some options you have. Whether you're a founder, a line manager, or an executive, one concept that you want to be fully cognizant of and measure is the time spent working in the business versus working on the business. Your ability to grow the business correlates heavily with how much time and effort you put into working on business building activities like systems, processes, and focusing on major initiatives. Earlier in this mini-series, I probably bored you to death highlighting why you needed a qualified accounting professional. That's because I didn't have one. In one of the earlier startups where we were bootstrapping, I had a desktop version of QuickBooks and made backups on CDs. I saved a few dollars a month by not paying for a backup service. I actually made 2 copies, one to keep in the office and one at home. A double time waster. I laugh at the silly mistakes I made, but I see many founders making the same kinds of mistakes. 1. Being unwisely cheap. 2. Mismanaging their limited time and best use of their skills. I'm good with numbers, but I hated the paperwork associated with accounting, keeping track of all the expenses in the proper category, sending invoices on time, following up on invoice collection, dealing with the banks, and late payments to vendors. And I was constantly worrying about things like, did we pay this bill on time? Or did I send a payment reminder to this delinquent client? Remember, I was a sales guy too. Because I closed the deals, I was pretty darn good at remembering the payment terms of each client contract. I'm not sure if this was a blessing or a curse. I kept the invoicing dates in my head. Crazy, right? Even when I eventually got help, I told them when to invoice clients. I couldn't figure out how to get it out of my head and give the job to someone else. Accounting made me miserable. I didn't show it. Like a good entrepreneur, I figured this was another sucky task that needed to be done and I just had to put my head down and do it. Don't whine, just do it. One solution I tried that I don't necessarily recommend is that I hired my son to do bookkeeping for us. As mentioned in an earlier video, look out for the dangers of working with family. My son was good with numbers and at the time he was going to business school. He had to learn my wacky system on his own. I helped where I could. It was the ignorant leading the ignorant. If he messed up, I chewed him out. I failed to create boundaries, but despite my efforts, he got good at it. And yet we always had a messy chart of accounts, all because I didn't want to spend a few $100s a month for a qualified pro. And then my son graduated. Uh-oh, he was leaving. I wrangled another team member reluctantly to take my son's place. Things went south quickly. Finally, this employee said to me, I can't do this. I just wanted to help. It turns out that she wasn't interested or proficient but felt obligated. Finally, I got the message. I needed professional help. And I kick myself now looking back at how long I waited. I should have hired a professional much earlier in the business. I reached out to my network, spoke with a couple friends, and I learned from these conversations that there were companies that provide bookkeeping, CPA, CFO services, or what is known now as fractional CFOs. I always dreamt of having a CFO, but it was too cost prohibitive. And at the time, it wasn't a full-time role. It never occurred to me that I could have access to a top-notch experienced CFO for 4 to 8 hours a month, which is all I needed at the time to take our financial planning to the next level so it could support our growth. A friend recommended a company, which we ended up hiring. I was still very skeptical, or maybe more curious, about how these folks were going to figure out and extract things from my head and my colleagues' heads and into a system that did not involve me. I badly wanted it to work. I just didn't think it was possible. It was hard for me to let go. Maybe I was subconsciously attached to something that I closely managed for so many years, although I hated doing it. Like some kind of Stockholm syndrome only founders have, getting attached to a process you're a hostage to. And it worked. They got everything out of my head. It was a huge burden off of my shoulders. And the beauty of finally hiring a professional is that my hate for accounting turned into something of joy. Once I was removed from the day-to-day data entry, chasing unpaid invoices, and looking at bank balances twice a day, I now met with an accountant for an hour a month for a quick review of how we did in the previous month, and then spent 2 hours a month with the CFO analyzing and identifying areas for improvement. The CFO was charging us a premium hourly rate, and I was reluctant to pay that much at first, but let me tell you, it was worth every penny tenfold. In this episode, we reviewed again why you shouldn't manage the finances on your own, how paying a premium when you're ready for a CFO or fractional CFO can be worth the money to free up your skills and headspace to focus on growing the company. In the last stretch of this mini-series, we'll examine how to move beyond the numbers to see the story they're telling. In short, you'll learn how to lead from strength in numbers. And it's time to give back. We talked about hiring family members in this episode. If you have a family, lead by example. For instance, if you volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, bring your children with you to build a site. You'll be immersing them in a world of service, developing their character, and creating memorable moments. If you're enjoying these tips on accounting best practices in our video series on how to grow your business, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel.